Hey everybody, Jedi Weller here to talk to you today about how to create a TikTok-like application. Now, we're going to walk through a product map that we've made of TikTok, right, where we've captured all the different screens, all the different functionality, and we're going to walk through in detail how you can create the same thing for your type of application, right, or your type of business. Now, we have to disclaim that we do not own TikTok, and we are not suggesting that you copy the TikTok application in any way. This is simply a method of doing a case study for the TikTok application, so you can see what type of features are involved, and we can talk about how to create those different types of features. So it should be a really fun exercise. If you are a development team, a design team, or a founder looking to create your own application, and you really are struggling with laying out every single step of the way, or you're having difficulty conveying your requirements to your designers or to your developers, the product mapping exercise is a really useful exercise, and I think it will really help you a lot. So the product map that we're going to go over is going to help explain a couple things. It's going to help explain the different features that are involved in this type of application. We will go through and we'll annotate those together so you guys have an understanding of what different features mean and what to watch out for when you are creating your own application. We'll also talk about some of the hidden gotchas that are involved in the process, right? Because obviously creating a mobile application is difficult. It is hard. It takes time, it takes patience, and there's a lot of stuff that you might not know that you don't know. So I will try to help explain those things as best I can as we go. Now, of course, you guys will ask for this, so we will post a link to not only the product map that we've created for this video, but also more detailed instructions in the comments below, and the links will be to our website at openforge.io. So with that said, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here with the TikTok example product map. All right, so here is the product map from a high level. Now, again, if you're wondering what a product map is or where we've come up with this is a system that we've come up with at OpenForge that allows the founders and the business stakeholders and designers and developers to all see the application from a bird's eye view, from like a high level. That way, everyone is on the same page about what is being built and what is the functionality. The reason we do this is because the traditional feature requirements documentation, and you might have seen this, a user can do that, a user can do this, typically they're hundreds of pages, thousands of pages long, and no one can fully grasp or fully understand an entire feature requirements doc. But when you have visual requirements, which is what we live by and what we breathe by, you can really start to understand what a product has and what are the actual features, right? Because a picture says 1,000 words, so therefore for every picture we have, we need 1,000 less words on our actual page. So with that said, let's dive in here and we're going to talk about some of the different components of a product map. The first thing to talk about are the page number convention. Now, the page number convention is a way for us to kind of establish how we're going to lay out the different features. The first number that we'll have here is going to be the actual feature itself. So you can see we have authentication is 1.0. The home page, which is like the main screen for TikTok, is 2.0. The discovery and search feature we have as its own feature. And even though there's only one page really associated with it, so that's 3.0. The video posting is 4, inbox is 5, user profiles are 6, and settings are 7. Now the second letter, or the second X here, is going to be the view, okay? So there might be a flow, such as authentication, that has more than one view associated with it. And then the last letter is the state. The state is really talking about the data state. So as a perfect example, if we're talking about Facebook, right? If I go to my Facebook homepage and you go to your Facebook homepage, it is the same homepage, but there's going to be different data because me and you are different users. So for that reason, we would call that a different data state to represent to the developers, hey, if a different person comes in here, there needs to be different content. And then you will have to talk to your development team about what that content looks like and how that works. Okay. So let's dive in, first things first, to number 1, authentication of the TikTok application. So for every application, you are going to have a splash screen. This is a requirement by Apple and Google. You just have to have one, so make sure to include it. That way your team doesn't forget about it when you are submitting to the App Store. It will get denied if you submit your app to the App Store without a splash screen, so keep that in mind. And after the splash screen, we have the authentication flow. So I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. There we go. All right, so authentication flows, authenticating through TikTok, you have a couple different methods. You have a phone or email address, and if we go to 1.1, which is right over here, right, we can see we have laid out the phone sign-up method and the email sign-up method. Now, with phone, you'll probably use some sort of phone service or SMS service. We've used Twilio before. There's a bunch of different ones out there. You can always just type in like Twilio alternative on Google and you'll get different results. One thing to note here is that iOS and Android functionality is slightly different. iOS, I believe as of this date, does not allow you to have automatic copy from your messages to the TikTok application, whereas Android does allow you to have that native functionality. So if a user gets a message and it has a certain format, it can just automatically get filled in here. So it's kind of cool differences between iOS and Android. Now, if you guys are building a hybrid application, which I would highly recommend, most people in the world are building cross-platform right now, you would have the decision if you want to custom code this to have a custom native and iOS and native Android functionality, or if you just want to have one seamless experience. It's up to you, right? It doesn't matter which way you go, but it is a consideration to have. And then for the email address here, this, again, there's going to be an email address provider on the back end that would be used to actually verify the email addresses. So this is going to be another expense to you guys as a business. It's probably going to be super, cheap, maybe just a couple bucks a month. But this is something that your developer will be able to look up and research for you. And you can use any email service out there. It doesn't quite matter which one. Okay, so 1.2 is create account. Now, creating an account involves a username, and this is something that a lot of founders get a little bit held up on because they think, okay, it's just as easy as creating a username, but it's not. There are different considerations here. Okay, the first consideration is, are your usernames unique? And if they are unique, what's the error message that happens when you type in a username that's already been taken? For instance, I go by Jedi Hacks on Twitter, and if I went to Twitter and somebody else tried to create a username with Jedi Hacks, then they would probably get an error message that says, hey, this is already taken. And I believe Twitter, if I recall correctly, I believe they actually suggest other usernames. So you have to decide if you want to do that. So this is a great time to kind of annotate here on your screen and say, hey, note for the developer, right? We want to have a suggested username, a suggested alternative. And then the developer is going to ask you, well, what do you want to append to it? Do you want to append numbers? So would it be Jedi Hacks 123? Do you want to suggest a randomized username, right? What do you want to do? Or do you just want to say, sorry, that username is already taken, right? If you just say, sorry, that username is already taken, that's probably going to be the easiest development effort. If you want to give suggestions, that's going to be a little bit harder, etc. Right? These are all things you want to consider. And create password is pretty straightforward. Most companies use 8 to 20 characters with a combination of numbers, letters, and special characters. So I would just use kind of like the industry standard at the time when you're creating this. All right. So that was those flows from version 1.1 to 1.2a were all related to creating your own account through TikTok. But a lot of people, most people, like to have social media sign in, right? It's a nice way of having a user easily sign in without having to manage multiple accounts, and it's very, very effective. Now, each of the different providers, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they all do this a little bit differently. And we're not going to go into detail on how they do it and what features they actually allow. They will be provided to you, like those requirements will be provided to you by the actual company itself. If you just type in Facebook SDK, on Google, you'll come up with the Facebook SDK, and it'll tell you how to authenticate. Same with Twitter, same with Google, etc. One note on that, as we scroll away from it, is that different ones do allow you to customize, the kind of the experience a little bit, but it's generally pretty limited. So, And I don't think there's a lot of value to customizing or trying to customize that. Everyone knows what login with Facebook is, so just have them go to the native Facebook app, click authenticate, and then take you right back to the normal experience. All right. And then you guys can go through the rest of these on your own, right? The only thing I'm going to kind of point out is that there's a lot of different data states here, right? And we're just on an authentication flow. You think as a user, authentication flow is super easy, right? But really, there's a lot of stuff you got to think about. So what I would suggest to you when you're designing your own application is find the application that looks the most like the one you want to design, right? And go through step by step, screenshot every single step, right? And then do a one-to-one comparison. Which steps do you need to include in your application versus which steps are not relevant to your application, right? And that will help you when you're laying out your own product map. All right, so that was authentication. We got through it pretty quickly, which is great. And now we're going to go into the meat of the TikTok application, which is the home screen. All right, so a couple things to talk about here for a home screen. First off, the home screen has two different data states, right? One data state is a suggestion list of videos for you. And one of the requirements here that you would annotate for your application, if you have this feature, would be that the videos automatically start playing. It's a cool feature by TikTok. You don't have to actually click to play, which gives it a really dynamic feel right away. And the other thing to annotate here about the For You section is that this is customized for you, right? For your profile. This is going to be built up over time. When I first started using TikTok, it was just giving me random videos, right? And each video had a category. Now, did I see the category? Probably not, right? But on the back end, the developers, they do keep track of that. And they use those categories to tailor tastes, to me, to what I like. Now, I believe we are actually missing here a profile section. I believe when you first log into TikTok, it actually allows you to say what kind of stuff you do like. But since we already logged in a long time ago and we didn't feel like creating new accounts, we just skipped that part of the video. So you will have to create that, and that will be helpful for your development team. So make sure you do that. Okay. Now, let's see. We talked about the algorithm that's going to be involved in curating tailored content for the user. And now let's talk about a couple other things. So they actually have two different navigation menus here on the home screen, which is a pretty cool effect. I'm seeing a lot of applications do this nowadays, right? They have a traditional bottom nav bar, right? This is very easy to build, especially in frameworks such as Ionic framework. It's very, very popular. It's very easy for the user, right? Imagine if you have a cell phone in your hand, and you're either right-handed or left-handed, doesn't matter. What's the easiest place on the screen to click? What's going to be the middle and the bottom, right? That's why navigation items typically are not at the top, especially with larger devices, right? We have to think about this. And then we also have a side navigation menu here, right? 3 of these actually take you to different states, and we've labeled in the product map where they take you. But one of them is just a like button. It's very convenient, very easy to use. So this is a very good design and a very good effect from TikTok creators. All right. And then the other main part about the home screen, which is actually, it could be considered its own feature, but we just have it as part of the home screen because of the video feature itself, is comments. Now, comments are a huge, huge feature. They are not only very important from a social aspect of your application, but they are also extremely difficult sometimes to get right? And what do I mean by that? Well, you may not know this, especially if you're new to the mobile application landscape, but whenever you have user-generated content, in which comments are, Apple requires, as part of the review process, that there is a flagging system built into the application, right? And you might be asking, okay, well, what is a flagging system? So a flagging system is a way for a user, like let's say I'm using TikTok, right? And I see a comment that I find offensive. Maybe I'm under 18 years old, or maybe I'm over 18 years old and I just find this content offensive. I don't want to see it. Well, I have to have the right to be able to remove it from my view. So if I see a comment I don't like, I can actually report it, right? Now, what does reporting it do? Typically, what companies will do is we'll say, okay, if you report a comment or you report some user-generated content, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Someone could just be trolling you. But what it does mean is that I don't want to see it anymore. So on the back end, what we'll do is we will hide that content from this user, the user who actually reported it, and then it has to get submitted to a back-end portal, which is going to be managed by your team, right? Where you will have the ability to control whether or not that comment or that post or that user-generated content is actually banned and removed. And if you need to take any disciplinary actions for your users or for that user in particular who posted that comment, you can do that. Now, Apple doesn't actually check the back-end side of this, so you can just have the functionality where if I report it, it gets removed from mine. But I would highly recommend that you do have a way to manage your content and your disciplinary actions for users on your backend system, because otherwise you will definitely get a bad user experience. So keep that in mind. All right. Now we also have the ability to share a post, right? And this is huge. This is like literally the crux of every single social media application out there. Is to be able to share content with your friends, with your family, etc. So you can see this little share button here. It says go to 2.0b. So we're going to find 2.0b, which is right here. Now, the sharing functionality, this is actually pulling up the device's native share functionality. So it allows you to send to some recent context. It allows you to share to other applications, such as your messaging app, SMS, Snapchat, Instagram, etc. Allows you to save the video, right? It allows you to report it. So here's the report functionality that I talked about earlier. And if you don't want to use any of these different features and you want to share it through some other way, you can simply copy the link. Now, all this is going to be native functionality, again, which you can use basically from any different type of technology stack that's out there. Okay, cool. Now, number 3 is the discovery or the search feature and functionality. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit to talk about this. So the search functionality, right, there are going to be a couple of different states here. We only documented one of them, but whenever you have search functionality, there's going to be a couple different things that you're going to want to decide. First thing you're going to want to decide is whether or not you have autofill. Okay, so I'd recommend on your product map for your application, right, annotate that. If a user types in search, does it autofill like a search term? Are there certain categories that get automatically filled? etc. What happens? There are different providers, like Algolia is definitely a provider for search, and it's one that we've used, and it's definitely a great one. There's other ones out there as well. So keep that in mind. Sorry, I'm plugging in my laptop here. So keep that in mind because you're going to have to determine which platform you're going to use. You're going to have to determine what the pricing model of that search algorithm is, and then your development team is going to need to do some, I'd say, pretty substantial work here to make sure that the data model actually matches the search model and vice versa. You can also see here we have some suggested search items, things that are trending. This is something that a lot of social media apps have, and I would definitely recommend putting in your application as well. Okay, so let's move over to number 4, video posting. So I couldn't think of a good video or picture to actually include on here. So we just have a screenshot of our keyboard to keep it nice and neutral and appropriate. So there's a couple different things here. A lot of people, they say, okay, I want my app to be able to take a video, right, and have filters. But this is a big feature. And I can tell you right from the get-go that this could be a lot of work, right? It depends on what you want in this. Now, there are some different SDKs, which are essentially software developer kits that are out there that handle some filters, some effects, that kind of thing for you. I'd highly recommend using one of them. Whatever the cost, just pay for it, because it will probably, definitely be less than building it yourself, right? And that's why we have software as a subscription as such an awesome and effective model in the software development industry. So I'm not going to go through all of these different filters and mechanisms. I just want to kind of bring them to your attention. Whatever your application is, you will, I'm sure, have different ones, different requirements, but these are just some common ones. And if we look at the different screens in the 4.0 section, we see here that you also have access to the native gallery of your device, so you can see past photos that you've taken. They do have a way to kind of select sounds as well and edit those. And then it's just a bunch of video editing, sound editing, effects, etc. Right? You can see that this is the most in-depth feature, right, of the product map. And this is a really cool thing to see. This is why we do this bird's eye view, right? Because if you're estimating out work and your work estimate for your development team, and let's say your user profile section, right, takes 2 weeks to build out, and I'm just guessing here, let's just say 2 weeks. Well, you can guesstimate just from a high level, even without getting a lot of developer input, just by this product map, you can guesstimate that, hey, the video posting section is probably going to take longer than that because there's a lot more features, right? It's not a perfect science, but it does give you, especially if you're a non-technical founder, it does give you an idea of kind of like where is the most complexity of your application going to fall. Sometimes it can be just misleading though, right? For instance, under search. So that's why you should definitely build this product map with your designers and your developers on your team. Okay. And then we're going to go over here to inbox here. Now, for inbox and the messaging feature, people can do this different ways. You can either build your own, or again, you can use a third-party SDK or an API. We like to use like QuickBox and also Twilio are both really good ones for messaging. So I'd recommend checking those two out. We'll post links to those below as well. But basically, messaging can have a couple different flavors. All in all, you can have one-to-one messaging, which is I message you, you message me, that's it. You can have group-to-group messaging, you can have individual or group messaging, etc. So this one, I believe, TikTok, I've only ever used one-to-one messaging, so I believe that's the limitation of what they're supporting, but you could also do group messaging as well. And again, with messaging, it is user-generated content. So you have to have a way to report a user, okay? And you can see right here, we have under the settings, it's a different way to actually report that user, okay? So again, make sure you have the report feature because any user-generated content will require the report capabilities. Alrighty, and second to last here is user profile. Now, user profile is a very important feature for a lot of social media applications. The basis of it is that you're going to have who you're following, who's following you, how many likes you got. You're going to have your username. Some companies allow you to change your username, some don't, right? It's going to be up to you as the founder of your company or the decision maker what you choose. One thing I will say about the imagery here, right? So you notice how this image is cropped, right? It's cropped into a circle. Not only does this look cool, but it also saves on significant hosting costs for you. Imagine you have 1 million users and they each upload a picture that's 1 megabyte, right? Well, you now have a substantial hosting cost just for this one little profile picture that you're not even showing the entire thing for. So when we talked about data optimization and optimizing your application, especially the data transfer, this is one of the tricks that you can do to basically decrease the impact of your application, right? You can say, okay, well, you know what? Before we actually upload this to the server, we're going to crop it first. And then instead of uploading the entire image, whatever this image used to be, we're only going to upload what they edited in that little circle, right? So now we take our big image, that's 1 megabyte, and maybe we can, cut it down to a fraction of that size, right? Maybe even 10% or less. It's a really cool trick. So keep that in mind. And whenever we talk about data that's being submitted by the users, it's going to be an important consideration. Now, look, companies spend millions of dollars on algorithms that basically enhance performance, and decrease the size, like the packets that go along with the videos and photos that people are taking. As cameras get better and better, the default photo sizes get larger and larger, right? So keep that in mind. You may have a cost. The best way I can say to measure out what your cost could be is build out your application, and before you go live, do stress testing, right, on your application. Stress testing essentially means that you test it with a bunch of different users or with a bunch of simulated users, right? You can do automated testing and then run that 1,000 times over the course of 24 hours. And then from there, you can measure what your data consumption is. You'll also be able to measure from AWS or Microsoft Azure or Firebase. You'll be able to measure like what the cost is too. And then from there, you can actually get an estimate on what your daily, monthly cost would be. Okay, and I'm not going to go into the rest of these here. You guys can, again, go over these yourself. You have the ability to see who you're following. You have the ability to edit your profile and favorites, find friends. Now, finding friends, this doesn't need to be enabled, especially if you're using your contacts. So this is native functionality. Right now, I believe you cannot do this as a PWA. So you can do it as a cross-platform application because cross-platform applications, are essentially wrappers for native apps. So it is a native app at the end of the day. But for PWAs, which means that if you were going to have users install this through their web browser, you would not be able to use that. All right. QR code, again, there's libraries for QR code. So it's going to be pretty easy for you to implement. You can see other user profiles. It's important to understand and to lay out what you can see about another user versus what you can see about yourself. Now, when you're developing these, it should be the same page with just certain content hidden. That's the best way to develop it. That way you don't have to actually create 2 different pages and maintain 2 different pages worth of source code. But that's just a minor thing for your development team or for you if you are the developer. Okay, and last but not least, settings and privacy. So if we zoom in here, there we go. If we zoom in here to settings and privacy, we're going to see there are actually a lot of settings here. We have manage your account, privacy, security, balance, tick code, share profile, push notifications. So this is an important one, right? If you do enable push notifications, you have to have a way for users to turn them off and turn them back on. App language is especially important if you're going to go international, and it may even be important nationally within your country. Dark mode is one of the newest features on both iOS and Android, and it's an important one. If you've never turned your application into a dark mode before, I would try it out before you design your own app, because if your app doesn't support dark mode and you try to do this, it's going to look really, really strange. You might not be able to see anything actually. Okay, accessibility. Accessibility is something that's very important, especially if you are a larger company, right, where you have high risks of lawsuits. Look, the ADA laws are there, they're established, right, and they're getting more and more refined every day. There's already plenty of cases of lawsuits on web, and mobile is next, guys. So please be sure to make your mobile application just as accessible as your web application. And also from a usability standpoint, right? Like you want users to be able to use your application, and we want to be able to provide for many different types of people, right? With different age ranges, different eyesight, everything. So keep this in mind and support, accessibility. Okay, so report a problem. Now this is a good one here, right? Some people forget about this. Imagine you go out to the App Store and you launch your application and you don't have really sophisticated data analytics or Crashalytics hooked up to your application. Well, you're going to want a way for users to report a problem. You do not want them to have their only recourse be to rate your app poorly on the App Store. So have a way in here. If a user is having an issue, allow them to easily find a way to report that issue directly to you. And then make sure that you actually respond to that, because a lot of people, they have this, but they don't have anyone assigned or a process flow to actually respond to issues. And then they'll get backed up, their users will become unhappy, and they'll leave bad reviews. So very important feature. Help Center is often very useful too, especially if a user doesn't know how to use your application. They can learn without asking you. Again, this is process improvements. And then, of course, under the About section, we have community guidelines, terms of use, privacy policy, copyright, etc. Now, one of the last things I'm going to talk about, the settings section, or the settings overall feature, is monetization, right? Now, there is a separate flow for a creator versus a business, right? And this is part of their monetization strategy. Excuse me, I can't talk today. Now, you are going to have your own monetization strategy. And whatever your monetization strategy is, right, make sure to lay it out. Make sure to lay it out in extreme detail. If you do have more than one user type, you will have to do this process for both user types. And it may seem like a lot. You may say, well, no, just this one user is going to have just a couple extra features, right? It doesn't matter. Create a user flow for every user type. That way it is absolutely explicit what you're building and how you're going to build it. Your dev team will need this, your design team will need this, everyone will need this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and that was it. So that was the TikTok product map and an example of how to actually create a product map for TikTok. So again, just as a quick recap, if you are building your own application and it's going to be similar to TikTok, I'd highly suggest you download this product map, right, and create your own. Now, don't just copy what TikTok has done, right? Use it as a guide, use it as a reference, as a case study, as a resource, right? You are more than welcome to utilize your knowledge, things that you learn along the way. And you'll look at the most famous applications out there, right? We have Lyft is, just like Uber, right? Which is just like a cab app, right? You have Tinder is just like Hinged, right? It's just like Grindr, it's just like XYZ. You have all these different applications. They essentially have the same different type of functionality, but the main difference is what's their demographic and what's that one key feature that they offer that's different than their competitors. And if you guys are having trouble with this, I definitely recommend checking out one of our other videos on our OpenForge YouTube channel. It's called A Startup Guide to MVP Applications, which you can also find below. And this video will kind of go into the details of how do you create a lean canvas for your application? How do you establish what is your unique value proposition? Who is your customer, right? All of these things are very important questions to ask, and they're actually more important than the app itself. Having clear direction on your user, on your unique value prop, right? On the problem you're trying to solve. These are all things that are more important than the application itself. But once you do answer those, then it's time for this product map. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned a lot from this. Again, we will post the product map as well as some additional resources in the comments below and on our Academy website on openforge.io. So please check it out. If you have any questions, please comment below. We will respond as quickly as we possibly can because your comments are super important to us. We would love to hear what you understood, what you didn't understand, and if there's any other applications that you would like us to do this exercise for, please let us know as well, because this is a really super useful exercise. Creating a product map is going to be one of the most beneficial things you could possibly do for your application. Doesn't matter if it's mobile, this could be web, this could be mobile, this could be, on your TV box, it could be anything. So please create a product map. Please be as detailed as possible. And please hit that subscribe button if you thought this was useful. Thanks so much, everyone. We will see you soon.